This video will walk through how you can benchmark your negotiated rates against other specialists in your area using data from HexIQ. Let's jump into it. You can access benchmark reports right in the HexIQ platform. For an example, let's look at emergency room visits for general acute care hospitals in Maine. When you enter an NPI or TIN, an arrow shows where your rates fall compared to others in your area on the rate distribution graphs for the 4 major payers. You also get the stats for the min, max, average, and mode for each payer. In the list view, you can view each line item and download the raw data file right from this page. Let's open raw data specific for Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield in Maine, and pop it into a pivot table to see what the rate distribution is for all our hospital systems. I'll rename the worksheet to Summary View and pull in a count of all of our NPIs. We can format this count as a number and make it a little bit more readable. Next, let's add in the rates we have for these codes in place of service code 23, which maps to emergency rooms. I want to group these together into ranges so it's easier to visualize how spread out the rates are for each of our NPIs. Let's set a starting point of $10 and go all the way to $680 in $10 increments. Now I want to add some slicers so I can filter my table to look at one CPT code at a time. Let's filter this data by billing code and billing code modifier and throw in one more slicer to display the billing code description. Okay, my slicer looks like it's filtering the table as expected, so the next step will be to add in a chart so we can quickly see how many of our NPIs are getting reimbursed in each range. We'll resize the chart and add in a title. I want to get it ready to modify the source data so we can pick one hospital system to benchmark against the other hospital systems in Maine. There's a group of hospitals under an umbrella group called Covenant Health that had a renegotiation dispute with Anthem in July of 2023, and they almost fell out of network. I think it will be interesting to see how their current negotiated rates compare for emergency room visits 1 year after their contract issues with Anthem. I think this looks pretty good. Let's highlight the hospitals we want to benchmark. The 2 hospitals I mentioned are St. Joseph Hospital and St. Mary's Regional Hospital. I'm going to create a new worksheet called Lookups and add these 2 organization names to a lookup table. You could also use the tax identification number, or NPI, depending on what makes the most sense for your use case. I'll copy and paste these names here, and then add a Covenant Health label for both of them. This looks good, so I'll go back to my raw data worksheet and add a new column for the benchmark labels. I'll wrap my lookup formula in an if-error formula so that I can set a default label for any organization name that doesn't match my lookup. You can copy and paste this formula from the description text, but I'll do a VLOOKUP for my organization name on the Lookups worksheet and return the value in the second column. Make sure to use an absolute reference to your lookup table so we can copy the formula down to every row of our worksheet. You can manually add the dollar signs or just hit the F4 key on your keyboard. Okay, we defaulted our label to Other Provider if it doesn't match Covenant Health, and we can copy this formula down to every row. I can see that there's a mix of Covenant Health and other providers, so we're ready to update the source data for our pivot table to pick up our new column. To do this, we'll go back to the Summary View worksheet, select any row in our pivot table, and change the data source so that it starts at column A instead of column B. Now we can drag our new benchmark values to the column section of our pivot table and see that our one column chart updates to show a stacked column chart. I want to change the sort order of my benchmark column fields so our benchmarked rates for Covenant Healthy show in orange and other providers show in blue. I'll move these slicers around a little so it's easier to read, and then we can toggle between our CPT codes to see where Covenant Health falls in the range of negotiated rates for emergency room visits. It looks like St. Joseph and St. Mary's hospitals still fall at the lower end of the spectrum for these specific codes. Organizations that use this negotiated rate data will have a clear advantage when entering into a renegotiation with commercial payers. Subscribe to this channel on YouTube to see more tutorials like this one to help you get the most out of the transparency in coverage data from HexIQ.